Hello, sir. Welcome to Micah's College, Mysore.
Thank you for inviting me over.
Sir, you are CEO Aim High India. You are an author. You write in newspapers. You are an investor. So there are multiple roles that you play. If I could ask you, what is the image of yourself that you have?
Yeah, so interesting question. We all need food on the table and food for the soul. So some of the things that you mentioned, I do it in order to get food on the table. For example, the work that I do as part of Aim High Consulting, the communication consulting that we offer to our clients brings food on the table. More often than not, that alone is not enough because you need food for the soul, something that leaves you happy and with a sense of fulfillment at the end of the day. The other things that you spoke of, like column writing, like some of the other things that I do, going out and teaching at institutions, for instance, all of that I do more as food for the soul. It would be pretentious if I said that I do it as a part of self-discovery. Okay, there are people who would like to believe that way, but to keep it very simple, it's a process of engaging with the world in order to find oneself. Some people, have a way of naturally discovering what their calling is. But some others like me meander from one thing to the other and end up sometimes discovering and sometimes not discovering. The last part that you mentioned, the investment part, that's more a consequence of my effort to find food on the table, where because I got familiar with the startup ecosystem, investing ecosystem there, I got a chance to participate in early stage investments and stuff like that. So a lot of it by serendipity and very little by design.
Right. Great, sir. With this introduction, we'll go a little deeper into the topic that we intend to discuss with you. There is no doubt that you are one of the best orators that I have come across. My question to you is, what made you such an exemplary orator?
Thank you for the compliment. When you say this, I find it hard to believe that, today I might have come to be recognized as some kind of an orator. Because it all started way back in perhaps the early 90s, when I used to make futile attempts to go to the stage and debate. Okay, my debates would usually end up with a lot of sweat on my brow and 30 seconds of glory there, trying to remember what I had mugged up. Okay, so around that time, a close friend of mine who is now my business partner, he used to be an ace debater in the country, the number one debater in the country. Gopinath is his name. And, he used to try and coach me and a few others into debating better. One thing that he said transformed my life. He said, don't worry about what you have scripted. You might have done it with great effort, great diligence, all of that, but you're the only person who knows that. Okay? And when you are there on stage, talk like there is no one and you are the expert on the subject. Okay? Easy advice, very difficult to internalize, but I have this uncanny ability to actually believe in what somebody else says to me with conviction and follow that path. I steadfastly did what this gentleman told me, and that has resulted in some amount of success. The second, perhaps you might find it funny when I give this to you as a reason, but I married my debating partner. Okay, so I'm married to Deepa for the last 20 years, and she was my debating partner in college. I knew her for 10 years before we got married. So yeah, I guess a lot of this debating, a lot of soliloquies later, after marriage it's mostly a soliloquy is what they say. But yeah, so debates, soliloquies, all of that has resulted in some oratory ability. But more importantly, if you are viewing this as advice to younger generation on what makes a good orator in single quotes, it's your hold on the subject. Okay, it has to come from conviction about what you are saying. When that is lacking is when all that sweat on the brow and 30 seconds of glory that I spoke of, that scenario, and the transformation can happen only when you develop the ability to go in depth.
Right. Sir, this is not there in my list, but your answer is prompting me to ask this question. How important is wit when we communicate?
Not just when you communicate. In life, wit is extremely, extremely important. If you ask me what is the problem with the world, okay, my view is that a lot of people take themselves too seriously and don't take the work that they do very seriously. Okay, if you flip that, if you take the work that you do very seriously and take yourself lightly, where all your success, where all your kiritas lightly, and that can give you a great deal of happiness. Forget what it does to others, but it will leave you happy and contented if you stop taking yourself seriously. Wit is a consequence of developing a worldview that is serious, but looking at it from the glasses where you are still able to see the funny side, the lighter side, the side that is incongruous. Incongruity is where it's not a straight line. There are, some other aspects also to it. That is, wit lightens up things.
Great. Sir, my next question is, you would have consulted a lot of companies, you would have given your advice and interacted with a lot of founders and investors. If NDA and other things doesn't come in between, could you share a couple of examples where you felt a project was extremely challenging?
Every project is challenging in some way or the other, especially when you do not have a cookie cutter model. Okay, a cookie cutter model is where there is a standard question, standard query, standard challenge, and there is a standard response to that. But in the industry in which I operate, and especially with the kind of companies that I deal with, these are companies that are inventing a category, that are challenging the norm, that are setting up their business in order to address something that is lacking in a society. Okay, which means a standard response from a communication consultant will not do. Okay, if you were selling another soap, okay, not that selling soap is easy, but if you were selling another soap, or if it is another consumer product in an already good artillery, then perhaps ingenuity is not required, perhaps newer responses are not required. But in categories where somebody is trying to say, hey, in 2009, let's say if Flipkart is trying to say that, you know what, India is from now on going to buy a lot of stuff online. Okay, it would have sounded preposterous, as much as, let's say, Enola saying in 2011-12 that, you know what, there's going to be a time when a cab is going to come in your direction and then you can see that on a smartphone. To begin with, people did not know what a smartphone was, or they had some vague notion of what a smartphone was, and the GPS mechanisms were not as sophisticated. Cabs were conspicuous by their absence. So in a world like that, how would you? Or if somebody told restaurants that, you know what, bulk of your sales would happen not because of people sitting across the table in your restaurant, but because they are going to order it in their homes. Okay, Swiggy. So each of these, or for that matter, in an industry in which you operate, education, if somebody said, hey, you know what, you can from now on learn at your own time and at your own pace, which is the dream of any student, or which is the dream of any educator. Okay, Byju's in that instance. So Flipkart, Ola, Byju's, Swiggy, each of these are challenges, but no lesser are the challenges posed by anybody else. For example, let's take someone like an open bank. Okay, open bank is the largest neobank perhaps in the country for sure, but perhaps in Asia. So when they come and tell you that, you know what, I'm not a bank, but I'll give you a loan. I'm not a bank, but I'll help you manage your accounts, and I'll help you manage your payouts. I'll help you underwrite. So it sounds very funny to begin with. Okay, now for you to digest that, internalize that, and then to be able to communicate that to the world at large, when all of them are looking at you with a great deal of cynicism and skepticism, because nobody is going to give you the benefit of doubt. Even if you are saying that, hey, this is a new proposition, you have taken, 10, 20 new propositions like that which change the world, nobody is still going to give you the benefit of doubt for this particular new one, because, like I said, these are propositions that challenge the norm, and if you need to really get them to believe you, you need to become that client first. And that's a very, very hard process, long process. So if you ask me what is more challenging, okay, managing, let's say, communication for a Gupshup. Gupshup is again another unicorn. 10 years ago, okay, we started working with them when, they were sending out emails and SMSs, but the founder had the vision that one day messaging will be a platform. Okay, sounded incredulous at that point in time, but today, in the age of conversational AI, we feel proud that we took conversational AI to the market, let's say 5 years before it became fashionable as a result of ChatGPT. So that's the beauty of the work that we do, where we are always dealing with newer ideas that are challenging the norm, that are transforming the society for the better.
Right, sir. Sir, now the number of companies that are operating in our country has increased. Number of channels available for them to market their products, communicate about their services has also increased. So this has increased the clutter in the marketing space. So in this whole bargain, what is happening to these small businesses? What should they do? Or what is the most effective tool that they can adopt according to you to remain very effective with their customers?
I can give you a one sentence answer: horses for courses. But if I have to elaborate on that, clutter has never been a new thing in the Indian market. I have cried myself hoarse over the last 25 years trying to tell people that, you know what, the sum total of all the media in India is greater than all of the media in the world put together multiplied by at least a single digit. Okay, I have said this, I don't know how many times and in how many contexts. It's crazy. I'm saying we are never short on numbers on anything. I'm saying the largest, population in the world, So as a consequence of that, and because of the diversity, both cultural diversity as well as linguistic diversity, regional diversity, I mean, we are never short on numbers to reach out to those audiences. It's always going to be very, very high. You will see it as clutter if you see everybody as your audience for the message that you want to put out. You will see it as an opportunity if you start segmenting. Okay, you use the word marketing, and I'm sure one of the first lessons or one of the early lessons in marketing is about segmenting. Okay, when you segment your audience properly, and then when you have the ability to decide what is the kind of media that you will use in order to reach who and what you are going to say in that media. For example, you can't say in a vernacular what you are going to say in a main line versus what you are going to say in your own, let's say, YouTube channel versus in a business publication versus on Twitter versus on LinkedIn. These are distinctive media which have a specific identity, a specific audience, and more importantly, a specific context. Okay. Therefore, I don't see it as too much of clutter. Yes, the numbers might be there, but in a country of 1.4 plus billion people, and with such, like I said, regional, linguistic, cultural diversity, you need so much media. Otherwise, they wouldn't exist. They are also businesses, isn't it? If you start looking at media as businesses, then you will realize that if they are surviving, there must be a reason why they are surviving. They must have their audience. Otherwise, they would have fallen apart someday. Coming to the second part of your question, where you're asking about what should small businesses do. Today, more than ever, small businesses have an opportunity to broadcast themselves. Thanks to social media, thanks to the many tools that are available to them, which helps them identify their audiences and to specifically play out specific messages to them, you can do two things. One is to create some kind of an air cover, okay? And the second is to also do specific sniper attacks, okay? So, which is, I hate the language of marketing where everything is, spoken in the language of war. Strategy is also borrowed from war, this whole air cover, sniper attacks, all of this. But just so that we speak in the language that everybody understands, today, MSMEs, especially smaller businesses, are that much more empowered thanks to media being in their own hands. Okay, I'm not here talking about mass media. I'm talking about social media and some forms of earned media as well. Earned media also panders to smaller businesses depending on what you are trying to communicate. So I don't see that the scenario is bad for smaller businesses. In fact, if you asked me to choose between today and, let's say, 30 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, when would I want to be a small-time entrepreneur or a small-time businessman, I would choose today more than any other day.
Great, sir. Sir, if a student wants to become a marketer, what are the basic things that he or she should do while in college?
If a student wants to become anything, okay, forget being a marketer, I would urge students to be interested. Okay, there are only two kinds of people in this world. I keep talking about this. Albert Einstein said this, not me. Those who look at the world with a sense of wonder, as though everything is a miracle, and those who look at the world as though nothing is a miracle, okay, with no sense of wonder. If you have to be a marketer, and this will perhaps hold true for most other professions also, you need to look at the world with wide-eyed wonder. Why? Because they say, if you have to market something to somebody, you have to first position it, where you have to position it in the minds of your customer. Which means what? You need to know how to get to the mind of your customer. It can't happen if you are sitting in an ivory tower, looking at your screen and imagining a world that is there beyond that screen. It won't happen that way. I'm saying you won't be a successful marketer. If you have a sharp sense of how the world operates, what drives people, okay, what motivates them, then you will get into a position where you will be able to create a stimulus that evokes a kind of a response. Otherwise, I'm saying, what stimulus will you create if you don't know what is the stimulus, what is the response that you want to get out of your target audience? Even to decide who your target audience is, you need to have some kind of an understanding of the world. What is lacking today is interest. Wide variety of reasons for that. Social media, to begin with, people are, getting gratified very easily, not having higher levels of ambition. I mean, if we talk about that, we'll get into sociological issues and stuff like that. I don't want to go there. But since marketing is also about sociology, psychology, a whole, wide range of subjects which go tangentially to marketing, it's important to understand that only someone who is interested in what is happening in the society, only somebody who can derive insights out of that by gently poking into every aspect of it, only that kind of a person going forward can be a good marketer. Of course, the marketer will also need to acquire other skill sets. I'm saying, which I'm sure today is more easily available, than earlier. I'm saying earlier I would have to say, you need to do an MBA in a good institution and stuff like that. Today, thankfully, 99% of all the knowledge that is there in the world is available free of cost on the net. Okay, which means, anybody can become anything. I'm saying marketer is the case in point, but anybody can become anything today, except for maybe you can't become an astronaut or something like that. But except for some really specialized, nuanced subjects, you can really become anything. And interest is the only factor that will determine what you will become.
Sir, you have been a wonderful communicator almost for 2.5 decades now. Yeah. When did you actually realize the importance of effective communication, and that has now more or less become your profession also?
Yeah. So realization happens in various stages, isn't it? One stage I already told you, I'm saying the stage related stuff. The other, if I can go back to the story of my life in some sense. So I failed in my second PUC. Okay. So I came back home and I'm trying to tell my parents that I have failed, and they are telling me, that ನೀನು ಇಷ್ಟೊಂದು ಬುದ್ಧಿವಂತ ನೀ ಹೆಂಗೆ ಫೇಲ್ ಆದೆ? I mean, I couldn't control my tears because, here is this guy who has failed in his second PU. Yeah, for whatever reasons. Maybe I was busy chasing girls, all kinds of distractions of that age when hormones get the better of you. But, the point is, here is this guy who has failed and he's telling his parents and they are telling him, you're actually an intelligent guy. So, that's when I actually decided, what? No matter what, I will never let them down again and I will never fail. Okay, number one. Communication. Okay, if those were just hollow words which they said, where, you're intelligent, maybe it would not fly. What happened in the interim? When I was sitting at home preparing for my supplementary exams, 2 articles that I wrote got published in one of the most coveted publications of those times, Competition Success Review, or CSR, okay, which IAS aspirants would use to prepare for their exams, and it is in that they would actually strive to somehow get their name out. Forget article. I'm saying if the article comes out, then it's like you've already done your IAS kind of a feeling. So in that, my article gets published twice. Here is on the one side, this guy who has failed in his PUC, and on the other side, his articles are getting published in that kind of a thing. Okay, so that's when I realized that I have this strength in communication. thanks to all the reading that I did, in my early years. There used to be circulating libraries in Mysore. I'm sure you are aware of those. Okay, and I would be having a subscription in virtually every circulating library in my locality, and every day I would read at least 1 or 2 books. Will sound too much in today's times of 30-second reels, but at least a couple of books. Of course, I'm saying at least one of those would be a comic digest kind of a thing, so that wouldn't take too much time, but otherwise also. So reading and then developing the ability to translate your thoughts to words, which gave me the confidence that, hey, you know what, I can become something in this space. Okay. However, to hedge my risks at a later stage, I did not take up journalism. That is what I wanted to do. I did not take up journalism. I ended up foolishly doing botany, biochemistry, microbiology. I regret that even to this day. That was not my cup of tea, but I still did that in graduation just to keep my options open, and then decided to do my master's in communication. Okay. A very interesting thing happened at that point. So when I was in my first year of master's, this is famous publication which exists even today, but it was #1 back then, called The Week magazine. They had called for applications for the post of correspondent in Delhi. Okay, 4,000 people applied, 6 rounds of interviews, 2 people got shortlisted for the 2 positions that were there. Not shortlisted, 2 people were made the offer, and I was made the offer too. So that's when I realized, hey, you know what? Maybe I don't even need this master's in journalism. Let me go and equip myself with something else. And I decided to do my MBA at that point in time. But this love for communicating and communication did not go away, even though I could not take up that week job because my father was really unwell. He passed away a year later, a couple of years later. And, I could not leave Mysore, my city, and go elsewhere. But what it instilled in me is this faith of, hey, you know what? You have this ability to communicate, but back then it was more written form of communication. In the later years, also to verbal forms of communication. So I decided to marry the MBA that I got with the instincts that I had in communication, entered the advertising industry, and in later years, slowly, looking at which side of the lawn is greener, moved to PR, moved to communication consulting, all of that. Sorry about the long answer.
And storytelling is one of the most effective forms of communication. The world has accepted this today. As teachers, if we have to help our students to become good storytellers, what is it that we can do?
So, if you have to be a storyteller, you need to have a story. Okay? Yes. More often than not, that is what is lacking. People today either do not have stories or they are too circumspect about their stories. They don't want to tell it to the world. Why? For the fear of being judged. Okay? Where does that fear stem from? It stems from, in a world that I and you lived in as students, there would be one close circle of friends who would know everything about us, what they shouldn't know also. And then there would be an extended circle of friends who didn't know so much, but you would still be close to them, and there would be some kind of a common connect. Okay? You would, by way of commonality of association, have circle of friends, and those would mostly be in concentric circles. Cut to today. You are operating in a world where everybody and their uncle is on the platform that you are on. Let's say on my Facebook, okay, there is my family, there are my close friends, there are my not so close friends, there are my colleagues, there are my ex-colleagues, there could be my clients and potential clients and all of that. So I am under this horrible pressure to project some kind of a common image to everybody. Okay, and that image usually is of some kind of a hero, some kind of a social crusader, some kind of a champion of causes. All of that kind of a pretentious thing is what, one is trying to project. In a scenario like that, you end up either curating or editing or obliterating your stories and end up being either no storytellers or very poor storytellers. A story comes not from here, it comes from here. It comes from the heart. And if it has to come from the heart, it should have made you feel something. Today, if I am reluctant to feel something because that will expose my vulnerability, then where is the question of a story? So if you have to become a good storyteller, my only cue is start feeling. Okay? In scientific terminology, they call it emotional intelligence. So I don't know whether there is a formula to develop emotional intelligence except to develop both emotion as well as intelligence, and go and seek out stories, not because you want to become a storyteller, but because you are interested in the story itself. Storytelling will happen as a natural consequence of that.
Great reply, sir. We will deviate a little to another area. You are also big on startup investments.
Yeah.
What is it that you look at in a startup before investing?
In simple terms, scope and scale. Okay? Is there scope for this business to survive and thrive over a period? Again, if you dig deeper, then you will have to assess whether there is a need for something like this, and whether the solution that this entrepreneur has come up with addresses that need and all of that. That's a very detailed analysis. But to give you a very surface level response, the scope and the scale. Can this entrepreneur grow this into something that is of significance, both in terms of impact and as a result of that in terms of size? Because when somebody is taking a bet at a very early stage, okay, the kind of stage at which angel investors like me put money, most on enterprises, no matter how intelligent you consider yourself, most enterprises are bound for failure anyway. I'm saying the hit rate, if you get 1 out of 10 startups succeeding, you should consider yourself lucky. So in every bet, you are banking on that one giving you at least a 20x, 30x, 40x kind of a return if it has to make up for all the other eggs that never hatched. So that's what you look for, whether it is addressing a problem that really exists, and whether it can really scale into something that is significant.
Sir, you know the in and out of India's startup ecosystem. You may be consulting a few of them. You would have definitely invested in a lot of them. How promising is India's startup ecosystem? We get to read a lot of success stories. What is the real shape and size of India's startup ecosystem?
Yeah. So I think we have spoken about this earlier, but at the cost of repeating for the benefit of the viewers. So there couldn't have been a better time than today to be a part of the startup ecosystem in India. Okay. Why? What does a startup need? A startup needs 3 capitals. Okay. 1, financial capital, quite obviously. Okay. And financial capital today is available in abundance. Even in this funding winter that people are talking about, it is still available in abundance for the right idea and the ability to execute. Okay. So I'm deliberating on this because the right idea alone is never going to get funded. Okay, anybody can have an idea. Okay, idea with the ability to execute, which comes from finding the ability to find the right kind of partners, ability to have the right kind of wherewithal, ability to have complementary skills, willingness to part with stake, and all of those things. I think that is what will, get somebody interested in you to invest. So you have state governments and the central government today supporting, startups by way of grants and stuff like that for very, very early stage startups, pre-seed angels. I'm saying you'll be surprised. If you look for angels, every other person, is an angel today. Anybody who has reached some level in the corporate world today is willing to, put money on a startup and stuff like that. So money is not an issue. And once you have crossed the initial hurdles, once you are at a pre-series A kind of a stage, the institutional, investors will take cognizance of you, and then the VCs, Ps, and then eventually retail investors by way of IPO and stuff like that. So it's a fairly well-charted path that is available for a startup today when it comes to financial capital. That's not such a big issue as compared to, let's say, 10 years ago or 15 years ago. The second capital that you need is human capital, which 1.4 billion people, we spoke about them, okay, and with a wide variety of skill sets, and especially in the kind of businesses that we are talking about here, technology businesses, there is no shortage of talent. Bulk of the technology that the world is today running on has been built by Indians, okay. So I'm saying, if you show them the right reason why they should come here and operate, I don't think, people will resist that. I'm saying everybody will have their heart pining to be in India, in a familiar environment, as long as everything else is equal. Okay, so human capital. There are issues. Okay, there are skill deficits. For example, in the manufacturing industry, I cannot say what I said with the same degree of conviction. Okay, that's a different ballgame. But by and large, okay, talent deficit is not such a huge issue, at least when you are starting out. The third capital is reputation capital, okay, which again, today we are in a good position because you don't need to rely on traditional media to evangelize your idea. If you have the right kind of idea, you have with you today the wherewithal to play to at least a finite set of audiences, okay, which hitherto was not available at all, okay. And you can also, over a period, develop a following that is significant enough for you to become an influencer, a much abused word today, influencer, but I'm not talking about those kind of influencers. To be a real influencer in the category in which you operate, okay, so that is possible today. So financial capital, human capital, and reputation capital, all three converge to make entrepreneurs confident, and that's why I keep saying that this is the best time to start up in India. Everybody, including startups which have made it and startups that failed and failed miserably, are out there to somehow collaborate with another startup, another entrepreneur, giving that guy or lady a push to move forward. It's the Silicon Valley culture that has trickled down to India already, where it's not a competing ecosystem but a collaborative ecosystem that has developed, and I'm very happy to note that.
Social entrepreneurship is another trending thing that we find, at least in the media. Could you please help us understand what is social entrepreneurship, and why is it felt that a country like India has great opportunity in social entrepreneurship?
In an ideal world, every entrepreneur should be a social entrepreneur, okay, because at the end of the day, you are trying to untangle something that is there in the society and trying to make capital out of that. India especially, okay. The whole game is about bridging the disparity that exists in the society, okay. Social entrepreneurship, whether it is education or whether it is access to finance or anything for that matter, access is the keyword, okay, which is bridging disparity. So any enterprise which addresses not the first 50 million but the next 500 million by default ends up becoming or sounding at least like a social enterprise, and that's why there is so much talk today about social enterprises, okay. And look at the kind of categories that emerge after the first 50 million. First 50 million could be about cabs and e-commerce and getting food from the restaurants and stuff like that, but the next 500 million, like I said, is about access, access and access, okay. Now the kind of enterprises that get built there, for them it's not an alternative but an imperative to be socially conscious. They need to be crusaders if they have to be successful, okay. They can't be mercenaries. It's okay if the first 50 million comprises of mercenaries. Mercenary is somebody who works for money, okay. It doesn't matter what I am doing as long as I make my money at the end of the day. A crusader champions a cause, okay. So these crusaders, whether it is agri-tech, whether it is climate tech, whether it is providing access to finance for rural women, whether it is democratizing education which percolates down to the smallest level when it comes to school, or democratizing information itself, because information deficit is a big story, isn't it, in a country like ours. In all of these, that's why you are seeing today the big wave of tier 2, tier 3 cities emerging as entrepreneurial hubs. Of course, they won't spawn unicorns like how the metros did, and it's not important also for unicorns to emerge. Yeah, unicorns as North Stars, where you look at them and say, hey, you know what, I want to one day become like that. That's like saying, I want to play cricket like Tendulkar, I want to act like Amitabh Bachchan. So that's okay, not everybody is going to make it to that. But to create real businesses with real impact on the society around you is what is slowly happening, and I can see that happen, especially when you see businesses that are being built for tier 2, tier 3. Of course, there is also a conducive ecosystem that is being built, ONDC and stuff like that, which is also democratizing digitalization in a certain other sense, but that it's going to be a very long conversation, so I'll halt here.
Sir, my next question, I need an honest opinion from you. You've been very candid and outspoken so far. I request you to have the same.
You're scaring me now. Let me drink some water.
What Ford, Dell, Bill Gates, Elon Musk have done for the US economy, very similar things are done by Tatas, Mahindra, Birla, Adani and Ambani to our economy and society. We idealize Gates and Musks and all others, but we have loads of complaints on our industry leaders. Where is the mistake according to you? Have these leaders made a mistake in presenting themselves, positioning themselves? Or is it a fault in our thinking and society?
So I feel it is the way a society evolves, isn't it? I'm saying, for example, we were brought up in a society where there was no abundance, okay? Anybody who had abundance or who wasn't austere as, let's say, we were, we would be told either to, shut us up, or because there was an element of truth in that ತಲೆಯೊಡೆದು ದುಡ್ಡು ಸಂಪಾದನೆ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ. Anybody who ran a business, okay, and made a profit was seen as someone who is evil. Okay, people could not make a distinction between profiting and profiteering. So it takes years, sometimes decades, in a country that is as large and as diverse as ours, perhaps a century of successful business leaders, for us to come to terms with the fact that, you know what, a businessman need not break people's heads, need not be as unscrupulous as we make them out to be in order to be successful. We need to idolize people who are businessmen. But let me bring this conversation back to entrepreneurship, because entrepreneurial stories make it easy for us to idolize heroes. Why? Because the time band there is crunched. What would have taken several old world businesses several decades to achieve is there for you to see in action in a very short period of time. And people can see that, hey, you know what? Yeah, I'm saying there are bad examples, and we can speak about bad examples in the entrepreneurial world also, but there are mostly good examples where there was a palpable, perceptible need that was felt in the society, and somebody came up with an answer to that, and somebody fed them money, the government stood and covered their backs, and lo behold, you have a unicorn. Lo behold, you have a problem that is solved in the society. When large businesses did that in the old world in their own way, and in a world that was opaque, it was easy to cast aspersions on them, isn't it? Okay, so not all of them would even be wrong. I am not holding a card for them and saying, you know what, they were all clean. No, but they may not be as bad as they have been made out to be either. It is the opacity of the world of those times that, made it easy for people to cast aspersions on them, which I think as we move forward, as the world becomes a lot more transparent as a result of digitalization, there will be less aspersions cast.
Sir, this is the second time I'm interviewing you. I consider myself privileged. This question I had asked you during our first interaction also. I repeat this question for the benefit of the online audience. You have high regard for women entrepreneurs. What are the reasons for it?
In fact, it's my honor and privilege that I'm getting interviewed by you the second time. This also gives me the assurance that the first interview went well. So, yeah, the reason why women are better entrepreneurs is because they are naturally predisposed to A, being nurturers, B, they have the ability to combine both left brain and right brain. Okay. They are great communicators, they are great planners. If you go back to the hunter-gatherer era, the lady who stayed back at home or cave, took care of, the children, took care of the resources, helped plan, and all of that. Over the years, women have come to do a wide variety of things which require both strategic skills and creative skills, and psychologists, psychiatrists agree on the notion that women can combine right and left brain properties a lot better than men. And from the industry of communication, I endorse the view that women are far superior communicators than men, far superior than men. So ability to nurture and the ability to communicate, apart from having a great degree of resolve and ability to endure, which nature has blessed them with, makes them great entrepreneurs. It's just that today we don't see as many women entrepreneurs as there are male entrepreneurs because of the stage of evolution that entrepreneurship itself is in India. You saw far lesser women in IT, far lesser working women, let's say if you went back 20 or 30 years ago. Today that has changed, and I'm very, very certain that when it comes to entrepreneurship, that change is going to happen much sooner, and in the next 5 to 10 years, there will, I hope that, it will be in the same ratio as the population.
Nice. This brings me to the last segment of this conversation, sir. Let's talk something about student entrepreneurship. What are the tips that you have got to give to schools and colleges like us to encourage student entrepreneurship?
It's ironic, because if we dwell upon this conversation, it is as though many of your students or students at large in this world will have a choice going forward on whether they should be entrepreneurs or not. The tragedy, or depending on the way you look at it, or perhaps the positivity of their times, if we are talking about 5 years, 10 years later, is going to be that they will not have a choice. Entrepreneurship is going to be an imperative and not an alternative, like I said earlier. They may be entrepreneurs in a sense that is slightly different from the way I and you are interpreting it today. For example, they could build an enterprise, or they might have a startup, which is one way of entrepreneurship. Anybody who will operate in a gig economy is also an entrepreneur of a different order. Why? Because he is going and selling his ware to the world and is trading time for, value, which is nothing but entrepreneurship. Okay, I have this to sell and I am trading this for this thing, and not to one specific organization, but it's available to the world at large on a platform, or however that person might have developed his or her network. That is different, but we will all be entrepreneurs of one order or the other. There will be very, very few jobs the way we see it today. Thanks to AI and ML, it's going to really change the world. Like, they keep asking, how many jobs will be lost to AI and ML? And I heard an interesting answer recently: all the jobs. All the jobs. The way we know it today, every job is going to be lost, which will give rise to new jobs. Okay, you won't be the same kind of teacher in an AI ML infested world 5 years, 10 years later. I won't be the same kind of communicator. Okay, so it's going to give rise to very different jobs, very creative kind of jobs, jobs that will require you to operate at a level of knowledge and wisdom instead of merely being disseminators of information. Okay, so that, of course, the kind of harakiri that will happen at a low skill job level and stuff like that, we will deliberate on that a little later perhaps. But since we are talking about students that are graduating out of colleges like yours, who have some skill sets to boast of, some expertise to go and trade with the world, they will all be forced to become entrepreneurs. It will be their enterprise, which is backed by a certain degree of expertise, a certain degree of creativity, a certain degree of strategic thinking, certain skill sets, technical abilities, etc., that will decide whether they are going to thrive or fall by the wayside.
Sir, my last question, again it revolves around students, schools and colleges. If I ask you to give 3 things that we can do today to prepare our students for a world which you just described now, which is going to manifest in the next decade or so? What are the three things that we have to do?
I don't know if I can I don't know if I can dole out three things like that, but I will talk about one thing which I already spoke of. Get them interested. Get them interested in something. Okay. Let them find their own pathways, but get them interested. What happens if you get interested? If you get interested, you probe, you go deeper, you will slowly develop conviction in that subject that will eventually become yours. You will start internalizing that, and that will slowly become yours. Then once you start owning it, when it has become yours, you will go and deal with the world with a greater degree of confidence. And confidence has no competition. Everything else has competition. Confidence has no competition. Okay. So once you develop the confidence in your ability, it should not be hollow confidence. If it is hollow confidence, it's gone anyway. But if it's confidence that comes from enough number of hours of in-depth research, internalizing, then that kind of an individual will do very well in the world. That kind of an individual will be able to operate, like I said, at a level of knowledge and wisdom much beyond just information aggregation. AI and ML will do all the information aggregation that is required. I'm saying that's a commodity today. It's available to everybody. That's no big deal. It's not going to be a differentiator. What's really going to be a differentiator is how you are going to use that ability to quickly aggregate information. Okay, and how you are going to make use of that to either build a business or to augment your expertise or to augment your personality or to give vent to some kind of a creative skill or the other, or to make the right kind of decisions, to make the right kind of purchases in the market, be it the market at large or the stock market, all of that I'm saying. So we have the tools in our hands. If we are interested and if we develop that ability, that strength from the inside, that is when I think we will eventually create students who are pictures of confidence, and confidence has no competition.
Sir, I sincerely hope that teachers like me would be able to instill interest and confidence in students studying in various schools and colleges. This is one of the wonderful conversations that I've had in the Tea That Matters. Thank you so much for being our guest and sharing your knowledge and time. Thanks a lot, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Ramcharan. In fact, I'm also very hopeful that you will be able to instill that in your students, because you as an educator are interested. And the more educators we find like you who are interested in the world, otherwise you wouldn't be doing a series like this, you will be able to instill the same kind of interest in the students, and I really do hope that happens. Thank you so much. Thanks for inviting me over.